Larry, in your new book, The Founder's Key, you write, quote, "We cannot soon have a government that operates entirely within the confines of the Constitution," unquote. Now that's a very alarming statement, if true. We can't soon have a government that operates entirely within the confines of the Constitution. Why not? What's the status? What's gone wrong?
Well, we built up this huge entitlement state and made an enormous investment in it, and according to the strict meaning of the Constitution, it's unconstitutional. And all of the best attempts to reform it are themselves also, according to the strict meaning of the Constitution, unconstitutional. What are you going to do?
So you're saying Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, the whole welfare state, and I guess you're referring also to a lot of the regulatory operations of the government.
Sure.
What are we left with under that theory?
Well, if you read Article 1, Section 8, there are 17 clauses, and about half of them, a little more, are about national defense. Most of the rest are about a national system of commerce and protection of property rights. And there's 2 or 3 about the federal government being able to operate on the space where its operations are located. That's the scope of the federal government, and there's flexibility in it for there to be changes. And there have been so many, though, that they go quite beyond any limits of flexibility. And so my own...
do you think it's practicable to go back to that government, or have times changed with the changing government?
Well, so I guess what I think about that is, I think that we should undertake a gradual process of converting the entitlement programs into property rights of people, into accounts they own. Mm-hmm. And that I think we have to have a social safety net. It would be better if it were at the state level, but we have it at the federal level, and I don't know if we'll get rid of that. And so what would I do then, you might ask me?
You're only a university president.
Yeah, right. I would look at those 3 things that I think are the central features of the Constitution, and I'd try to get them back. I would have limited government, that is, I'd make it a lot smaller, and work it back toward the confines that it was built to be in. But above all, not big enough to overawe the society. See, that's the point. I think that limited government, I've heard you speculate about this a lot, and I think it's correct. In a war, goodness knows how big the government might get, and even safely get. Mm-hmm. But is it going to stay that way? It's a great point of Winston Churchill's that if you treat an economic difficulty like a war, you're always going to have unlimited government. He protested against that all the time. Mm-hmm. So, limited, not big enough so that the society can't control it. Representative, that means, that's the second feature of the Constitution in my opinion. That means everything that happens in the government is traceable back and accountable to a constituency in America, directly or indirectly. That means the bureaucracy, for example. Like there's a really great law being proposed called the Reins Act. If the bureaucracy makes a rule that has over X amount of impact, it sunsets in 90 days if the legislature doesn't pass it and the president sign it. So back to lawmaking. And then finally, separation of powers. We need to fight our way back into our old clothes, and that means the president will execute and the Congress will make laws and the judges will judge. And instead, they all participate in administration in their various ways now, and they mingle their powers and authorities in ways that were not meant.
But as you say, you could only enact such a reform program with the consent of the governed. And so a lot of conservatives today are saying the people are the problem now. Yeah. The people are not interested in constitutional government of the sort you describe, and they're not interested in taking you up on your offer to privatize social benefit programs because, to get back to a theme of our earlier discussion, government has affected the character of the people, but not in good ways. Unlimited government has not been good for us.
Let's go back to your old friend and mine, Bill Buckley. What did he say? He'd rather be governed by the first 100 names in the Boston telephone book than the Harvard faculty.
I think the first 2,000 names. 2,000? actually, yeah.
So it's, so, you know, if you read Article 1, Section 8, there are 17 clauses, the people have not made this mess. It's come upon them over 100 years by a very devoted force. And if you poll them right now, they're at worst very divided on these questions. Elite opinion is not really so very divided. There's some crazy people like us, right?
Well, we just polled the people, and they re-elected Barack Obama.
They did.
Exercising their sovereign right to do so by 51% and change. What makes you think that this is not a hopeless enterprise you're proposing to convert the American people back to their former selves?
Well, one can take comfort in the Romney campaign, or McCain, or Dole, or even the Bushes who won, right? They're not...
I always found the Dole campaign rather doleful.
Yeah, but it's something. I was, you know, it's a joke, but I was much more patient with the Romney campaign when I thought it was going to win.
Yes.
But is it like the great, or any of those campaigns I named, anything like the great campaigns in American history by the people who really understood how to talk about the nation? Do we think Ronald Reagan would have lost this election? I don't. And I don't even, I'm not ready to say that Ronald Reagan stands with the very first rank of American statesmen, but high. Mm-hmm. But in other words, you can't know, first of all, what's your alternative? Are you going to draw on the fact that the people have a right to govern themselves? And by the way, that's the first constitutional restriction, because if you can't do something in the law to somebody unless they agree to it, mm-hmm. that restrains the government. Or are you going to try to invent a new kind now? Drawing on what group is better than the people in America to rely on for stability in the government? Clergy? Academics? Where are you going to look, right? And my view is the charm of the great principles of America and its workings is not lost, and if we speak of it, it will ring and touch people.
So you think you can fool all the people part of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
Yeah, and see, another thing is this kind of government produces friction and injustice, and that presents opportunity.
As well as enormous costs.
Of course, yeah. And see, look, why did Mitt Romney not run against the bureaucracy? Why did he not run against the incredible size of the government and its extremely rapid growth in the last 4 years? Why didn't he point that out, right? He thought he was going to win on the economy. And isn't that a kind of sign about how he regarded the people? Mm-hmm. They're just here for their interest. I'm going to talk to that interest. And I don't think political things are decided exclusively that way.
So his central campaign appeal, jobs, 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 you think was too narrow, too unpolitical?
Also, yeah, that's right, and both too narrow and too unpolitical. It was ill-calculated because, by the way, the people who are suffering worst from the economy get a lot of relief from Obama and seem devoted for him. But the second thing is, I don't really think those are the deepest anxieties of the American people. I think, there's a Rasmussen poll. They've been taking it for 10 years. Do you believe you live in a system of consent of the governed? That's fallen to 17% yes now. Mm-hmm. There was a Gallup poll last year as the campaign was starting up. What's more dangerous, government or corporations? 60% of independents and Democrats said government. Mm. So I think that there's a lot of unsettlement with the way these political institutions are going, and somebody needs to argue it in the name of the original political institutions. Yes. And if you did that, you might get somewhere.
And the paradox is we have, constantly growing government and constantly lowering trust in government. And the question is, how long can that paradox continue? That the government gets bigger and it's trusted less and less every step of the way, in effect.
It was a technique of Obama's in this campaign to wrap his arms and legs around Romney and jump down in the mud. Mm-hmm. And so this terrible thing is happening, and his response was, you do it too. You see, in other words, the political system falls into disrepute, and it's hard to distinguish yourself as being better or above it. And that's a tool that is used now. But the truth is, what can overcome that is a courageous and incessant stand against this sort of thing. And who makes that? You know, why did Winston Churchill get called to power in first in September of 39 and then May of 1940? He had paid a price for a long time,
yes,
warning against what was going on. And by the way, it was known there were attempts to deprive him of his livelihood and of his seat in Parliament. And one of his people who gave him information had a child with Down syndrome, and a cabinet officer went to his wife in the daytime and threatened to transfer him to a place where the medical care was no good. Mm-hmm. And so Churchill stood up to that. And then, when he was proved right, everybody turned around and looked at him. And that means, by the way, there's an opportunity coming.
But it may require a wilderness years.
We're in the wilderness. We're there now.
Well, that would give time for a proper liberal education in the old-fashioned sense of the term, a liberal education that has room for conservatives and for self-evident truths to work its wonders maybe on the American public.
That's seems to me a high calling to revive the debate, and that takes education. You need to know a lot to participate well. If you're going to argue the arguments that Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Jefferson argued, takes a feat of understanding to get to a place where you can do it.
And a good place to begin is with your book. Thank you, Larry Arnn, for joining us on The American Mind.
My great pleasure, Charles.